My daughter looked me in the eye and said, "They're my real family now." I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I didn't chase her. 6 months later, she stood at my door at 2:14 a.m. No friends, no savings, no place to go. And the silence between us said more than any argument ever could. My daughter believed loyalty meant choosing the people who made her feel accepted, even if it meant leaving behind the people who raised her. She was confident, outspoken, and deeply convinced that family was optional once you found your chosen circle. I was the mother who worried too much, asked too many questions, and, in her words, didn't trust her judgment. I tried to explain that friends who demand distance from family are rarely building something healthy. I tried to warn her that belonging shouldn't require abandonment. But advice sounds like control when you're desperate to feel free. Where are you watching from today? Stay with me until the end. I would love to hear from you in the comments. Because this story isn't just about my daughter walking away. It's about what happens when loyalty is tested and when the people you choose disappear the moment life gets hard. At first, the distance didn't arrive as a rupture. It arrived quietly, almost politely. A missed call here, a delayed reply there. The kind of changes you explain away because you want to believe everything is fine. My daughter still came around at first, but her presence felt divided. She sat on the edge of the couch instead of sinking into it. Her phone never left her hand. Conversations ended abruptly, not because we had finished talking, but because something or someone else demanded her attention. "They're just texting," she said once, rolling her eyes when I asked if everything was okay. Her tone wasn't cruel, just impatient. That should have been my first clue. She had found her people, or at least she believed she had. They were always together, at cafes and crowded apartments, laughing loudly in photos that appeared on my screen before I ever heard about the plans themselves. They dressed alike, spoke with the same borrowed confidence, and referred to each other as family with the certainty of people who hadn't been yet tested. When she talked about them, her voice lifted. When she talked to me, it flattened. "They get me," she said one evening, shrugging as she stood by the door, already halfway gone. "They don't overthink everything." I smiled, even though something tight and unfamiliar settled in my chest. Soon, the invitations stopped altogether. Sunday dinners were replaced with vague excuses. Birthdays passed with hurried messages sent hours late. Holidays were negotiated like obligations rather than traditions. When I asked if something was wrong, she sighed heavily, as if I were the problem for noticing. "Nothing's wrong," she said. "I'm just growing. You should be proud." I wanted to be. I truly did. But growth usually adds to your life. It doesn't erase it. The real shift came the day she announced she was moving in with 2 friends from the group. Not discussed, announced. She stood in my kitchen, keys in hand, excitement radiating from her like certainty. She spoke quickly, confidently, as if speed itself could silence doubt. "We found a place," she said. "It's perfect, close to work, cheap rent. It just makes sense." I asked practical questions, the kind mothers ask when they're trying to help without controlling. "Do you have savings? Is the lease solid? Have you talked through expenses?" She waved them off with a laugh. "You worry too much," she said. "We've got it figured out." I offered to help her budget. She declined. I suggested reviewing the lease together. She smiled politely and changed the subject. And when I gently mentioned that friendships can shift under financial pressure, her expression hardened. "So you don't believe in me?" she asked. The room went very still. "I believe in you," I said carefully. "That's why I'm asking." She shook her head, frustration flashing across her face. "You always do this. You turn everything into a problem." That was the moment I realized we weren't having the same conversation. To her, my concern sounded like doubt. To me, her confidence felt untested. She packed quickly, too quickly. Clothes stuffed into boxes without sorting, decisions made with excitement instead of preparation. On moving day, her friends filled the apartment with noise and laughter, carrying furniture like the future couldn't possibly be heavy. I stood in the doorway again, just like I had years before when she left for school, only this time the goodbye felt different. "You'll be fine," I said. The words came automatically, but my voice carried more hope than certainty. She hugged me briefly, one arm, distracted, already turning back to the life waiting for her. And just like that, she was gone. The distance grew faster after that. Calls stopped entirely. Messages were short, functional, emotionless. When I reached out, replies came late, if they came at all. Once, after weeks of silence, I asked if she wanted to come by for dinner. She didn't answer. Later that night, I saw a photo online, her and her friends around a table, glasses raised, captioned, "Real Family." I closed the app without commenting. A few days later, she finally called, not to talk, but to correct something. "They think you don't like them," she said abruptly. I paused. "I don't dislike them," I said. "I just want you safe." She laughed, sharp and dismissively. "They think you're controlling." That word landed harder than she knew. Controlling. Not worried, not cautious, not protective. Controlling. I understood then that something had shifted beyond distance. A narrative had formed, one where concern was recast as opposition and independence required separation. I didn't argue with her. I didn't defend myself. I said only one thing. "If you ever need me, you know where I am." She didn't respond. And in that silence, I felt it clearly for the first time. She had already chosen sides. Not against me, but against the idea that family might still matter once freedom felt within reach. Distance to her looked like independence, like adulthood, like control. But I had lived long enough to know something she hadn't learned yet. Freedom that requires abandonment is rarely freedom at all. And this was only the beginning. At first, her new life looked vibrant from the outside. Photos appeared online in bursts, dimly lit rooms, crowded tables, unfamiliar faces leaning close together, smiles wide, laughter frozen mid-motion. She looked happy, or at least she looked like someone who wanted to be seen as happy. I studied those images longer than I should have, not for jealousy, for clues. Her clothes changed, louder, sharper, less like her. Her expressions did too, confident in a way that felt rehearsed, as though she were trying on a version of herself that hadn't quite settled yet. When we spoke, which wasn't often, she sounded busy, distracted, always halfway elsewhere. "They're spontaneous," she said once, excitement rushing through her words. "I love that. No overthinking, just living." Living, I noticed, had become expensive. She mentioned dinners out like they were nothing, weekend trips decided on a whim, concert tickets bought without hesitation, shared expenses that somehow never seemed equally shared. When I asked how she was managing financially, she laughed. "You always jump to money," she said. "We're fine." But fine is a fragile word. It can mean stable, or it can mean temporary denial. The first crack appeared quietly. She called one afternoon, her voice casual but slightly off rhythm. "Hey," she said, "do you think you could spot me a little, just until next week?" I didn't ask how much. I asked why. There was a pause. Not long, but long enough. "Things are just uneven right now," she said. "It's nothing serious." I transferred the money without commentary, not because I approved, but because I knew this wasn't the moment to lecture. Still, something lingered after we hung up, a sense that the ground beneath her was less solid than she wanted to admit. The requests didn't stop. They came dressed in reassurance, in confidence, in promises. "I'll pay you back Friday. It's just this once. Everyone's tight right now." Everyone, I learned, meant her. Her friends always seemed covered, always moving forward, always unbothered. When she talked about them, she framed their confidence as proof. "They're not stressed like you are," she said once. "They don't live in fear." Fear. That word again. I wondered when caution had become weakness in her mind. Gradually, the calls shifted. They weren't updates anymore. They were explanations. Why she couldn't come by, why she missed another family event, why she needed more space. "You don't get it," she said one night, frustration threading through her voice. "Every time I talk to you, I feel judged." I went quiet. "I'm listening," I said. But listening, I realized, wasn't what she wanted. She wanted validation, unconditional, unquestioned, and silent when necessary. Her friends gave her that, at least on the surface. They praised her independence, encouraged distance, reinforced the idea that separation was strength. "She's always checking in with her mom," one of them joked, she later told me. "Like, girl, you're grown." She laughed when she repeated it. I didn't. That was when the boundaries hardened. She stopped sharing details, stopped asking advice, stopped calling unless she needed something. And even then, the conversations felt guarded, carefully worded as though she were afraid to say the wrong thing. One evening, I asked her directly if she was okay. She exhaled sharply. "You keep waiting for something to go wrong. Why can't you just be happy for me?" Because happiness built on avoidance is unstable. Because belonging that demands silence comes with a price. Because I could hear the strain beneath her certainty. But I didn't say any of that. "I am happy for you. I just want you safe." She didn't answer. Days passed, then weeks. I heard about her life through fragments, mutual acquaintances, offhand remarks, things she didn't realize were reaching me. Her roommates had fallen behind on rent, utilities were being split unevenly, one friend had quit a job without a backup plan. She never mentioned these things herself. Instead, she spoke about loyalty. "You don't abandon people when things get hard," she said firmly during one of our rare conversations. "Family isn't the only thing that matters." I let that sit. Because loyalty is noble until it becomes obligation, until it demands sacrifice from only one side. The night she finally snapped, it wasn't dramatic, it was tired. "I can't keep explaining myself to you," she said quietly. "Every time we talk, I feel like I'm failing." That hurt more than anger ever could. "I'm not measuring you. I'm worried." "Well, stop. I need you to trust me." Trust. Another fragile word. I wanted to tell her that trust isn't blind, that it's built on transparency, consistency, and reality, not just confidence and hope. But she had already decided what my concern meant. So I said the only thing left to say: "I trust that you're making the best choices you can right now." She accepted that answer gladly, and with it she pulled further away. By the end of that month, the distance was no longer accidental, it was deliberate. She had chosen a life where family was optional, advice was interference, and belonging came with conditions. She didn't see the cost yet, but it was accumulating quietly, interest compounding in the background. Because when belonging requires you to silence the people who love you most, it rarely protects you when things fall apart. And they were already beginning to fall. By the third month, the change was no longer subtle. At first, I tried to tell myself it was normal. People drift when they're busy. Young adults pull away when they're building their own lives. Independence, after all, demands space. I respected that. I had promised myself I would. But this felt different. Our calls grew shorter. Her messages came hours later, sometimes not at all. When she did reach out, her voice carried a new rhythm, faster, distracted, as though she was always half somewhere else. She spoke more about them now, her friends, their plans, their opinions, their ideas about what life should look like. And slowly, without saying it outright, she stopped asking what I thought. One afternoon, I finally asked her how things were going financially. It wasn't meant as criticism, just a check-in, the way mothers do when silence starts to feel heavy. She hesitated, just for a second. "Fine," she said. "I've got it under control." But I could hear it, the strain behind the confidence, the pause before certainty. She had started going out more, dinners that turned into nights, weekends that blurred together. Small expenses stacked quietly, rides, drinks, shared bills, favors she didn't want to refuse. Each one seemed harmless on its own. Together, they began to erode the structure she had worked so hard to build. I didn't lecture. I didn't remind her of budgets or boundaries. I had learned by then that advice given too early becomes noise. Instead, I listened and I waited. The first real crack appeared in her voice during a late call one night. "Mom," she said, laughing too quickly, "can you believe how expensive everything is?" I asked what she meant. She brushed it off, said prices were rising, said everyone was struggling, said it wasn't a big deal. But later, after a long pause, she added quietly, "They say I worry too much." They. I asked who she meant. "My friends," she said. "They say money comes and goes, that I should just enjoy being young." I didn't respond right away. I let the silence stretch. "And do you believe that?" I asked gently. She didn't answer. That was when I knew something important was happening, not financially, but emotionally. She was standing between two voices, one that urged caution, another that promised belonging, and in that moment, belonging was louder. Over the next weeks, the signs became harder to ignore. She skipped a bill to cover a weekend trip, lent money she couldn't afford to lose, paid for others so she wouldn't feel left behind. Every choice nudged her slightly off balance, but pride kept her upright. She didn't want to be the responsible one, not the boring one, not the outsider. When I asked how work was going, she said she might cut back hours. Her friends wanted more time together, more flexibility, more freedom. "That's risky," I said carefully. She sighed. "You don't get it, Mom. This is my life now." And she was right. It was. That realization hurt more than I expected, because loving someone sometimes means watching them make choices you know will cost them, choices they won't believe are mistakes until the price is already paid. The distance between us widened, not through anger, but through omission. She stopped sharing details. I stopped pressing. Our conversations became polite updates instead of open exchanges. Until the night the tone changed. She called me close to midnight. Her voice was quieter than usual, slower. "Can I come over tomorrow?" she asked. My chest tightened. "Of course." She arrived the next day looking tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. Her clothes were familiar, but she seemed smaller inside them. She sat at the table and wrapped her hands around a cup of tea she didn't drink. "They're mad at me," she said eventually. I asked why. "I couldn't cover my share this time," she admitted. "I thought they'd understand." She stared down at the table. "They said I was being dramatic, that I should just figure it out." I didn't say anything. "I thought friends were supposed to help each other," she continued, her voice cracking. "But when I needed help, it was like I was suddenly inconvenient." The words hung between us. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about loyalty, about who stands with you when you stop being useful. I wanted to tell her everything I had been holding back. I wanted to say, "I warned you." I wanted to pull her close and shield her from the disappointment hardening in her eyes. But I didn't. Instead, I asked, "What do you think now?" She swallowed. "I think I ignored a lot of signs because I didn't want to lose them." That was when something shifted, not dramatically, not all at once, but quietly. She was beginning to see the difference between connection and dependence, between friends who celebrate you and friends who consume you, between being included and being valued. And when she left that evening, she hugged me longer than usual. Neither of us mentioned solutions. We didn't need to. Because Chapter 3 wasn't about collapse yet. It was about recognition, about the slow, painful understanding that independence isn't just about paying your own bills. It's about choosing relationships that don't cost you yourself. And as I watched her walk back to her car, I knew the hardest lessons were still ahead. She had not lost everything, but she was standing closer to the edge than she realized. And the fall, when it came, would not be gentle. She had learned to solve problems on her own, but experience alone could not shield her from the world's unpredictability. By the 4th month, the lessons of independence had begun to take root, but life, as it often does, had other plans. The small victories of budgeting, planning, and problem-solving were suddenly overshadowed by setbacks she hadn't anticipated. A minor car accident one week drained part of her savings. A surprise medical bill the next forced her to reconsider her budget. Then came the blow. Her hours at work were cut, leaving her with less money than she had counted on to cover even the essentials. For someone who had believed freedom meant doing whatever she pleased, the reality was sobering. She was learning, slowly but surely, that independence wasn't glamorous. It was demanding, relentless, and at times unforgiving. One evening, I received a call from her. Her voice trembled, uncharacteristic of the confidence she had been steadily building. "Mom, I don't know what to do. Everything is falling apart." I stayed calm, listening carefully without judgment. She rushed through a list of problems: missed payments, a broken washing machine, dwindling groceries, and the anxiety that came with facing these challenges alone. The freedom she had sought with such excitement was now suffocating, and I could hear the weight of reality pressing down on her. Step by step, I guided her, not with solutions, but with questions that made her think. Which bills are most urgent? Can any payments be rearranged? Who can help if needed? What's the first small step she could take to regain control? She took the lead. She made calls, rearranged her budget, and found temporary solutions. I observed quietly, offering support, but never taking over. The most important lesson wasn't about solving problems, it was about building resilience. She was learning to face consequences, to navigate life without an immediate rescue, and to trust her own capacity to make decisions. At one point, she broke down in tears. "I thought independence would be fun. I thought I'd feel free. Instead, I feel like I'm drowning." I held the phone close, my voice steady. Drowning isn't failure, it's reality, and reality teaches you how to swim. Slowly, she began to shift. The impulsive spending that had once seemed inconsequential now required thought. Tasks she had brushed off before were no longer optional. Mistakes that had felt catastrophic at first became stepping stones to wisdom. Every small crisis was teaching her a new skill, a new way to measure consequences before acting. Through the week, I noticed subtle but meaningful changes. She paused before purchases, considered long-term impact, and began to weigh priorities with an awareness she hadn't had at the start. She still experienced frustration, moments of despair, but now they came with reflection, not panic. She was learning that life's challenges were not punishments, but opportunities to grow. Even amidst setbacks, there were triumphs: successfully negotiating a lower bill, resolving a problem at work, handling an unexpected task without panic. These victories were quiet, internal, but they built an unshakable foundation. She was no longer just surviving, she was becoming competent, resilient, and capable of handling what life threw her way. By the end of the 4th month, the change was undeniable. She was still imperfect, still learning, but the daughter who had ignored every warning, who thought independence would be carefree, was now someone who paused, considered consequences, and acted thoughtfully. The bond between us had grown deeper, not only as mother and daughter, but as mentor and learner, guide and adventurer. Through these weeks, a vital truth became clear. Independence isn't just about doing things on your own. It's about trusting yourself, navigating uncertainty, and discovering that strength grows from confronting challenges, not avoiding them. She was learning that every decision mattered, that every action carried weight, and that accountability wasn't a punishment, it was a path to empowerment. As she hung up the phone that final night of the month, her voice carried a subtle confidence, quiet but undeniable. The road ahead would have more obstacles, more lessons, and more moments of doubt, but she was learning to face them all with resilience, skill, and growing self-reliance. The fourth month ended not with a dramatic turnaround, but with a steady, almost imperceptible shift in her character. She wasn't perfect, but she was stronger. She wasn't fearless, but she was capable. And she wasn't just surviving, she was learning to live with intention, building the foundation she would need for every challenge still to come. Month 5 arrived like a test she couldn't ignore. Life, it seemed, refused to offer her a moment of comfort. The early lessons she had learned, the small victories of budgeting, the growing confidence in handling crises, were about to be challenged in ways she hadn't anticipated. Independence, she was beginning to see, wasn't about freedom or fun. It was about facing consequences she couldn't control. A major expense, a car repair she couldn't avoid, loomed over her like a shadow. Panic flickered in her eyes, but unlike before, it was tempered with determination instead of despair. She called me that evening, voice steady but tight. "Mom, I need advice," she said. "I have enough to cover part of it, but I don't know how to make it work." I stayed calm, guiding her through the process, not with solutions, but with questions that forced her to think. "Let's figure this out together. What options do you have? Can you compare prices? Is there a payment plan?" We spread papers across the kitchen table, her apartment small and cluttered, but full of the traces of her independence. Calculators hummed as we went line by line through the numbers. Her phone lit up with texts from repair shops and finance companies. I offered guidance, but every step, every decision, every calculation came from her. She mapped out payment plans, compared repair shops, and even negotiated a small discount herself. Each call, each calculation strengthened her confidence. Panic no longer ruled her. Competence had begun to replace fear. By the time the repair was completed, she had solved the problem entirely on her own. Not perfectly, there were still lessons to learn, but with enough skill to carry forward. That evening, she sat on the couch, papers stacked neatly beside her, and reflected quietly. Her posture held a newfound calm, her eyes soft with pride. She had faced a real obstacle and navigated it without depending entirely on someone else. Confidence now came from competence, not defiance. Pride stemmed from problem solving, not rebellion. Month 5 wasn't just about surviving another unexpected bill. It was about mastering responsibility, about realizing that independence was not a gift, but a practice earned every day. She began to notice patterns she had ignored before. Impulsive choices led to crises. Careful planning led to stability. Decisions carried weight, and every action had consequences. The lessons from the previous months, the budgeting, the setbacks, the sleepless nights worrying about bills, had finally settled into her consciousness. She began anticipating problems before they appeared, strategizing solutions before panic could take hold. Even mistakes no longer crushed her. One week, she misjudged grocery costs, leaving her short by a few dollars. Another week, a minor payment slipped through the cracks. But now she faced each challenge with a plan. She problem-solved, reflected, and adjusted without panic. She learned that mistakes weren't failures, they were opportunities to adapt, to grow, to gain mastery over herself. I could hear the change in her voice during our nightly calls. "I figured out how to cover the car," she said, one evening, quiet and measured. "It wasn't easy, but I made it work." I smiled softly. "You didn't just fix the car, you practiced independence. That's what matters." She paused, absorbing it. "I think I understand now. I can't just expect life to hand me solutions. I have to find them myself." Exactly. That was the lesson she had resisted at first, the one she had been blind to during her early excitement for freedom. Independence wasn't a gift, it was a responsibility, and responsibility required awareness, patience, and courage. Her growth wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, steady, and almost imperceptible to an outside observer. But within her, a transformation was taking root. She moved through her days with more intention, weighing decisions she might once have dismissed. She began to plan meals, track spending, and prepare for emergencies before they happened. Each choice carried weight, but now she faced that weight with resolution rather than fear. She had learned to endure frustration without despair. She had learned to pause before reacting, to evaluate before deciding. And she had learned the most important lesson of all, that independence wasn't about doing whatever she wanted. It was about understanding consequences, taking ownership, and acting with courage even when the path forward was unclear. By the end of month 5, she had learned a crucial truth. Independence was not freedom from responsibility, it was mastery over it. Every challenge she faced, every unexpected setback, every long night spent recalculating budgets and negotiating solutions had been a teacher. Her confidence no longer depended on the world agreeing with her. It came from competence, from knowing she could face whatever life delivered and handle it thoughtfully. She was no longer just surviving the lessons of adulthood, she was learning to thrive within them. That night, as she lay in bed, she whispered over the phone, "Thanks, Mom. I feel like I can handle things now." I heard pride in her voice, tempered with humility. She had learned to navigate life without immediate rescue. She had experienced fear, frustration, and failure, and she had survived. That combination, more than any advice or warning I could offer, would guide her forward. Month 5 closed not with drama or fanfare, but with quiet reflection, a recognition that growth is rarely flashy. It is measured in the ability to face life as it comes, to take responsibility for choices, and act even when fear and uncertainty loom large. She was becoming more than independent, she was becoming competent, thoughtful, and above all, prepared for whatever life would inevitably throw her way. By the time she returned home, the weight of her choices had finally settled. She walked through the door quietly, her shoulders still carrying the remnants of struggle, but her eyes held something new, a quiet strength, hard-earned and unmistakable. She was exhausted, humbled, and yet quietly proud of herself. Every setback she had faced, the bills she couldn't pay, the doors that closed, the nights spent worrying, had taught her something she could never have learned through warnings alone. We sat together in the living room, silence stretching between us, not awkward but heavy with understanding. I watched her take a deep breath, finally allowing herself to feel relief, as if she had carried the weight of the world on her shoulders and was just setting it down. This is harder than I ever imagined," she whispered, voice trembling with honesty. "I didn't know independence meant this much responsibility." "I know," I replied softly, "but now you do. And the strength you've built isn't about avoiding mistakes. It's about surviving them and learning to rise after each fall." Her eyes glistened with gratitude, and for the first time in months, I felt a deep sense of connection. The daughter who once shrugged off my warnings, who once chose excitement over caution, had grown into a young woman who understood the value of guidance, discipline, and self-reliance. She wasn't the same person who had walked out that door months ago. She was wiser, steadier, and ready to face life with intentionality. We reflected on her journey together, the small victories, the major hurdles, the nights spent budgeting, the tears shed over missed opportunities. Each step had built her, layer by layer, molding resilience where there had once been uncertainty. She realized the truth I had been trying to teach all along. Independence isn't freedom from responsibility, it's the courage to face consequences and learn from them. Every choice she made, every challenge she confronted, shaped her into someone resilient, capable, and ready for life's unpredictability. More than money, more than possessions, this experience had given her and us a bond rooted in respect, trust, and lessons learned the hard way. She had learned that the world doesn't hand you success or security. You earn it through persistence, patience, and the courage to keep going even when the path is unclear. Through our conversations, I realized something vital. As much as we try to shield the people we love, real growth comes when they stumble, fall, and pick themselves up again. Love sometimes means standing back, letting go, and allowing them to experience life unfiltered, even when it's painful to watch. Watching her navigate hardships without immediately rescuing her had been agonizing, but the results were undeniable. She had transformed into someone who could trust herself, someone who could face challenges without fear. Over the next few days, I watched her reclaim parts of herself that had been buried under anxiety and struggle. She laughed more freely, spoke with quiet confidence, and carried herself differently, lighter, yet grounded. She was no longer defined by the mistakes she had made, but the lessons she had internalized and the wisdom she had earned. We spoke late into the night, sharing stories, reflecting on the journey, and celebrating small victories she had achieved along the way. She shared the subtle realization she had made, how careful planning saved her from bigger disasters, how asking for guidance didn't diminish her independence, how patience and perseverance could carry her farther than impulsive actions ever could. And I, as her mother, realized something too. The journey had taught me patience, trust, and the power of stepping back. It had taught me that sometimes love doesn't mean holding on. It means letting go and allowing the person you care about to discover their strength on their own. As she prepared for the next chapter of her life, there was a quiet pride in both of us. She hadn't just survived independence, she had learned to master it. She had learned that responsibility was not a punishment, but a path to empowerment. She had learned that resilience was built not in comfort, but in the cracks, the struggles, and the moments when life pushed her to her limits. I could see it in the way she packed her things again, different this time. She moved with intention, mindfulness, and quiet confidence. She was prepared, not just with belongings, but with the knowledge that she could navigate life's unpredictability. She was stronger, wiser, and ready. And as she walked out the door once more, I felt a mixture of pride, relief, and hope. She was no longer just my daughter, the one who had chosen friends over family, who had stumbled and who had returned with nothing. She was someone new, capable, resilient, and empowered. Life had tested her in ways we never anticipated, but those tests had shaped her into a woman who could stand tall, who could face consequences without fear, and who could embrace both victory and defeat with grace. As I watched my daughter rise from the mistakes she had made, I realized the lesson she, and perhaps all of us, needed to learn. Independence isn't about freedom from rules or escaping responsibility. True growth comes when we face the consequences of our choices, when we pause to weigh actions against outcomes, and when we confront hardship with courage and patience. Life will test us in ways we cannot predict, and sometimes those tests are painful. But it is through those trials that resilience is built, wisdom is gained, and character is shaped. Choosing short-term pleasures or ignoring guidance may seem harmless at first, but the lessons learned through reflection, accountability, and perseverance are far more enduring. In the end, what we carry forward isn't just our achievements, it's the understanding that responsibility, humility, and thoughtful choices create the foundation for lasting independence and true self-reliance. And that is a lesson no one can take away. Life tests us in ways we never anticipate, but those tests are where growth lives. Have you ever faced a moment where lessons came the hard way? How did you overcome it? Share your story in the comments. I would love to hear where you're watching from. Your experiences, struggles, triumphs, they deserve to be heard. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. This is She Echoed, where every story finds its voice.